Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel retaliates against Iranian targets in Syria. The Israel railways finally get closer to completing a project over a decade in the making, and 2 lone soldiers in the IDF share a very overdue message. Our top news tonight, tensions in the north are rising, and the IDF is now preparing for a possible Iranian attack following Israeli airstrikes on Iranian and Assad regime targets in Syria overnight. And claiming responsibility for the strikes, which is rare for the IDF, the army says they're in retaliation for the launching of Iranian rockets from Syria the day before. Well, the IDF reports hitting dozens of Iranian Quds Force military targets, and at least 11 people are confirmed killed, 7 of whom are likely Iranian. And Israel is also warning Syria not to allow any more escalation from within their borders. But just in case, the army says it's preparing for defense and attack on a wide range of scale. Loud explosions could be heard across the Syrian southwest, meanwhile, including over Damascus. And video of the attacks show loud explosions as Syrian air defenses activated, intercepting some of the airstrikes. But the IDF reports destroying at least 6 Syrian air defense batteries, multiple Iranian IRGC bases in Syria, and a building staffed by Iranians at the Damascus International Airport. Israel avoided Syria's Russian-made S-300 defense systems, however, over the presence of Russian troops, and the IDF says that it also coordinated the strikes with Moscow beforehand. Then, coincidentally, the IDF just concluded another surprise military drill in the north designed to test the Jewish state's response time to conflict. Thousands of reservists were called up to simulate the turnover from everyday to emergency and from defense to attack, including the gathering of troops and weapons, the delivery of arms and equipment, and troop movements throughout the region. This is the second such surprise drill held in the Northern Command under Chief of Staff Kochavi. And joining us now in the studio for more on the overnight Israeli strikes in Syria is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Sherman, thank you so much for coming back in today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So do you think that Israel's message was received loud and clear, or is this really maybe just the beginning of something more sinister?
Well, in many ways it's more of the same, only more so. As you pointed out, it's as opposed to many other Israeli actions in Syria, this was a retaliation to an Iranian attempted attack against Israel, which the Iranians might say is response to the killing of the Islamic Jihadi senior operative in Damascus, which is supported by Iran. So there's, this chain of tit for tat. You never really know what's the tit and what's the tat. But it certainly seems to be on a bigger scale. Whether this signifies a change of policy or a more vigorous policy with the new appointment of Naftali Bennett as defense minister, it's an interesting speculation, but I think it's still early to say.
Is Israel in any sort of international conflict by, so to speak, breaking Syrian sovereignty and attacking Iranian targets in Syria?
Well, that's been the case for quite a long time. I'm not sure. The question is not whether Israel has the permission to violate Syrian sovereignty, but whether it has a duty to violate it in order to protect its citizens. Because if Israel left Syria unscathed with the Iranian buildup, I think the implications would be very dire. Now,
we know that Israel avoided the S-300s, the Russian air defense systems that were brought over to the Assad regime. And we also know that, of course, again, these attacks were coordinated with Moscow. But what do you think Moscow is thinking at a time like this when Israel is saying, listen, we're coming in and we're going to attack?
Well, they did criticize the attack, but I think Moscow will, display grudging understanding unless it feels that its interests are being threatened. But basically, with the situation, there are 3 corners and Moscow in the background. You have Israel, Iran, and the United States. Because I think the real race against the clock is whether the internal situation in Iran will deteriorate before Iran can achieve its strategic objectives in Syria. Because we've seen that there ongoing demonstrations, disaffection there. Clearly, there's an internal problem in Iran, and there is a lot of disaffection within Iran with all these overseas adventures. So I think on the one hand, you've got this rush by Iran to try and establish some sort of strategic presence and an eroding situation in Iran. And then that, of course, depends on what the United States is going to do.
Well, so what do you think is more likely to occur first? A breakdown internally in Iran caused by the continuing protests, or maybe an uptick in severe violence, possibly a full-blown war between Iranian forces in Syria and Israel in the north?
Well, I'm not sure they're mutually exclusive, although I certainly do hope, as I've been saying for many times.
Do you think Iran would continue with a war if protests threatened its
I think if internal disaffection spirals out of control, I don't think they probably have to curtail their external adventures. But again, I think it depends a lot on American resolve, how they're going to pursue the sanctions, what's going to happen with Trump. Trump, up to a certain stage, showed a great deal of resolve, and then backed away on certain issues. I don't know how the upcoming elections are going to affect his ability of playing to his base. It may be a good policy to play it tough with Iran. There are a lot of moving parts, but as I say, I think the real question is: will the situation in Iran deteriorate fast enough to curtail its overseas adventurism, or will they manage to attain strategic goals before then?
All right. Well, unfortunately, it's time's game, and we'll see. Dr. Sherman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In other news, as Israelis across Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, celebrate, United States officials are asking that we start to pump the brakes. It's been a day since United States Secretary of State Pompeo made headlines announcing a return to Reagan-era policies regarding Israeli settlements. The United States no longer views Israeli settlements in disputed territories as illegal per se. But the White House says that doesn't mean Israel can do what it wants. Well, almost immediately after the announcement, Prime Minister Netanyahu and community leaders from Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, met, calling the decision a correction to a great injustice.
אני מודה שאני נרגש מאוד. אנחנו פה בגוש עציון, מקום שגורשנו פה במלחמת העצמאות. והנה אנחנו ביום היסטורי עם עוד הישג עצום למדינת ישראל. שעבדנו עליו לא מעט. ממשל טראמפ תיקן כאן עוול היסטורי, התייצב עם האמת והצדק. אני מודה לנשיא טראמפ ולשר החוץ, מזכיר המדינה פומפאו. אני חושב שזה יום גדול מאוד למדינת ישראל, והישג שיעמוד לדורות.
Then Netanyahu began approvals for a bill that would allow Israel to apply sovereignty to the Jordan Valley. Likud MK Sheren Askel introduced the bill a few weeks ago, but fast-tracked it following the policy change, saying there's no reason this bill wouldn't pass with an 80 MK majority. And Netanyahu has often touted that in the event of a unity government, his first move would be to annex. But just as Israelis are starting to whip out the champagne, White House officials are now clarifying the change in settlement policy is not a green light for annexation. In fact, the administration says that Israel shouldn't even see this as support for unrestrained construction in settlement areas. All the United States is saying is that contrary to the EU and the UN's current stance, the White House no longer views Israeli settlements in disputed territories as inherently illegal. Now, Blue and White Party Chief Benny Gantz's deadline to form a coalition ends at midnight, and the various party leaders are all clamoring to figure things out. But Avigdor Lieberman, who holds the deciding vote, arguably, made a deadline of his own, saying, form a unity government or else. It's every man for himself. Well, the Israel Beitenu head's deadline came and went, and in response, Lieberman is now blasting both sides. And here to discuss the fallout is Ziv Maor, chairman of the Israel Media Watch. Ziv, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Are we heading back to third elections? What's happening?
Things are changing from one moment to another. Currently, when we are shooting this, the most plausible prospect is indeed to have a third roll of election this March. This is the way it is, but things might change. Let's discuss the law a little bit. So Gantz still has until midnight Israel time to present some sort of government to the president. If he does not do so, the Knesset has 3 days to present with 61 members of the Knesset, a majority of the Knesset, another possible candidate, which is to be either third candidate or Netanyahu all over again. And this person will have 21 days to assemble to assemble his own coalition. The prospect for it to happen is little. So a final decision will eventually be made this Monday. But currently, the way it seems, we're going to another cycle of elections.
All right, well, let's break down some of Lieberman's comments from earlier today. You know, he said that both sides couldn't leave their personal politics at the door, and so now we're at the situation where we are. So, first, how would you?
I disagree with this comment, because I do believe, how displeased I may be personally with the eventual result, both big parties, both Blue, White and the Likud, eventually acted to fulfill their voters' wishes. The voters of Likud did not want to see a coalition with Blue, White and vice versa, and those parties stayed loyal to their ideology. The natural partners of the Likud are the parties that are from the Likud.
But we have multiple polls that show that well over 2/3 of the country want a broad unity government, want a unity government between the three biggest parties, the Likud and the Blue and White. So that has to include a large voter base of both the Blue and White and the Likud. So would you still say that both of these parties are fulfilling
Of course, those polls showed a very good answer to a very wrong question. This is not the question. The question is not whether you want a broad government, because everyone who answered that believed that his side should be the side that is leading this unity government. This is the premise of everybody who answered this. When it comes to the question, do we, for example, for me as a right-wing supporter, as a Likud member, to have Gantz as a prime minister, I'm willing to have him as some kind of a minister within the government, but not to lead. He does not have the skills to lead. He does not have the legitimacy to lead, and I can completely see how the other side says themselves.
Under any and all rotational agreements that have been propositioned, that have been proposed, Gantz wouldn't be the first person to lead anyway, so he would have time to ideally learn the position from Netanyahu, in that eventuality. So wouldn't that be enough?
No, it won't be enough. I'll tell you why. Because those past 2 cycles of election were not between Netanyahu and Gantz, were not between the Likud and Kahol Lavan. They were between Israel's democracy, that is the system in which we vote to get our leaders to make governmental decisions, and the bureaucracy that more and more bites out of Israel's democracy and makes decisions behind the back of the voters, behind the back of the public. This was what the election all about. Now, if you're talking about what is called a broad unity government, at the end of the day, this is a government that cannot accomplish anything with the democratic means. It will be completely paralyzed. And when the government, the public election, the ones that were elected in a democratic process are paralyzed, the ones that get to act are the non-elected officials that work behind the scenes against the public, the will of the public, which is a phenomena that extremely injures Israel's democratic structure. So if we will end up with such a government, with such a dysfunctional government that will not be able to tackle Israel's biggest challenge currently, which is diminishing the power of the officials, destroying the sort of deep state that we have in here, and to regain the power for the democratic system, then we should better go to another cycle of election to resolve this.
All right. Well, so my final question then is, you're being right now a big proponent of third elections. How do you think the results would actually change?
Well, it depends. The failure of the right bloc on the past election was actually a result of lack of understanding how should the ballot actually be. Let's remind ourselves that we are having a significant barriers of 180,000 voters in order to get in the Knesset. Under those circumstances, small fractions must unite together. And the way that the right-wing parties united in the September past elections caused a great loss for this barrier. Eventually, many voters did not get their party even into the Knesset, about 250,000, which is a significant number. And on the other side, on the left, this not happened. Not a single voter did not get his party through the line. So if the right-wing bloc will find a way to determine the unities and the unions in a way that will not leave small fractions behind, which is possible, then we will have a whole different 23rd Knesset, which will be able to form a functional government.
All right, Ziv Mo, thank you so much. For anyone who commutes to work in Israel or in general likes traveling around the state, listen up, because we have some really great news. Finally, Israel's public transportation is about to get a much-needed upgrade as the Israel Railways begins launching trial runs without passengers for the new fast train line between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The direct line boasts 28-minute travel times between Israel's two biggest cities, from Navon station in Jerusalem to Hagana in South Tel Aviv. And after launching hopefully by the end of the year, it's expected to run every 30 minutes in each direction. But the line's launch has been delayed many times, over malfunctions, shutdowns, and more, leaving Israelis feeling fed up and stuck with the current overloaded system. In fact, the original launch date was in 2008, over a decade ago. But as of now, the train at least connects from Jerusalem to Ben Gurion Airport, and after finishing the connection to Tel Aviv's Hagana, authorities believe they'll be able to extend to other Tel Aviv stations and even Herzliya by sometime in 2020. Just be advised that if you're planning a trip in the near future, the trial runs may cause some schedule changes. Part of being a true Israeli is going to the shuk, or the market, to grab a bite to eat, to shop, or just enjoy a nice Friday afternoon. But either way, as in every city in the Holy Land, there are many shuks to check out right here in Tel Aviv, and ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has the rundown on each one.
An open-air market, or as Israelis like to call it, the shuk, are filled with tons of vibrant, fresh Israeli produce, fresh fish, spices, arts and crafts, and trendy cafes.
In Tel Aviv alone, there are over 4 must-see shuks
that are the lifeline of every Israeli, and I'm about to give you the rundown on each one.
The Carmel Market is the largest market in all of Tel Aviv. It's the best place to be on a Friday afternoon for locals who come to grab a beer, tourists who are looking to soak up the Israeli culinary scene, and even chefs who come to pick up fresh produce. You'll also pass by cheap clothing stalls, fast food spots, spice stands, and get a feel for the true essence of Israeli culture.
The Nechalat Benjamin market is located in the heart of the city and is open twice a week, every Tuesday and every Friday. It's hands down the best place in the city to find unique, handmade items like arts and crafts, jewelry, and everything in between. Over 200 artists set up shop every week to offer their creations to the public. The Levinsky Market runs the length of Levinsky Street here in South Tel Aviv. We're here right now at the Cafe Levinsky, which is a must-see spot in the market. This is a soda filled with fermented fruit, absolutely delicious and very Instagram-worthy. In this market, you can find a huge range of products, from dried fruit, nuts, spices, even soaps. You can see a lot of bakeries, delicious restaurants, and at night, tons of bars.
The most recent addition to the Tel Aviv market scene is the Sarona Market, the latest culinary center often regarded the Chelsea market of Israel. A pretty sharp contrast to traditional food markets such as the others on this list. However, it offers its own unique culinary experience, housing over 100 businesses, local producers of meats, cheeses, spices, and imported goods from around the world. Definitely a Tel Aviv hotspot. So whether you're looking to go shopping, grab a bite to eat, or just get a feel for the shuk scene in Tel Aviv, you have more than one market to check out.
All right, now, do you feel pain in your step? Well, meniscal injuries are one of the most common knee injuries for Americans, but thanks to a new technology coming out of Israel, people who need a new meniscus are in luck. And ILTV's Nittany Manson has the details.
In a landmark surgery earlier this month, 2 Israelis became the first patients to have ever received artificial menisci in their knees. The meniscus is a crescent-shaped cartilage that sits in the wrist, knees, and select other joints. And whether from playing sports, walking wrong, or just day-to-day wear and tear, it's surprisingly not that hard to tear your meniscus. In fact, about 750,000 procedures are performed each year in the US alone, replacing the cushy shock-absorbing tissue pad between the thigh and shin bone. Also, transplant tissue is a very scarce commodity in many countries, and studies show that many people who get natural transplants continue to experience pain, often eventually getting a full knee replacement anyways. Well, Israeli researchers in Netanya have been working with Active Implants, a company headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, and together they've now made artificial menisci available commercially. The product has been in development since 2006, and the so-called new surface meniscus implant will be used first in Israel and then in Europe, with the goal of replacing the meniscus and avoiding pain or extensive physical therapy. Also, the implant is inserted into the knee through a small incision, so patients can usually go home soon after the operation is over. Then finally, Active Implant's CEO says it's very exciting to finally bring the device to the people of Israel, where the implant was invented and developed. And the product is currently going through trials with the US FDA.
Moving on, lone soldiers are service members from all over the world who volunteer to enlist in the IDF without family or a support system nearby. But while the Army offers many programs to make enlistment smoother on a lone soldier, there are still a lot of problems, and we don't always hear about them. So a couple of American soldiers actually teamed up with the IDF and made a video about their struggles. And here to tell us all about it is ILTV's Shanna Fold. Shanna, take it away.
Okay, so this video was very touching to me. It basically shows some of the sensitivities that commanders and officers in the Army could have when dealing with lone soldiers, and also when dealing with any soldiers. That was a really important message from the producers of this video. I actually caught up with Jenna Kaufman over the phone, and she told me that she got started working on this when she saw a lot of complaints from soldiers on Facebook groups. But before I go any farther, I just want to give our viewers a little taste of the video.
Yeah, please.
אז חשוב לדעת למה ומה אנחנו עושים איתם. הגעה הביתה עד 12 בימי שישי. ברגע שאנחנו חוזרים הביתה, אנחנו מנקים, עושים כביסה, קונים אוכל לפני שהסופר נסגר, מבשלים, ואולי אפילו תופסים אוטובוס כדי לנסוע לעיר אחרת לעשות שבת. אם לא נגיע הביתה מוקדם, לא נאכל בסופש.
All right, so we can see from this video that, we're talking about common issues that lone soldiers maybe face that the rest of the, the Army doesn't really have to interact with.
Yeah, so the video addresses a bit, as you saw, getting home in time to clean and buy groceries. And that's because other soldiers who are 18 and 19 years old, they're going home to their families on the weekend, whereas immigrants who are here in the Army, they don't necessarily have that comfort.
Yeah, they might not have people to do their laundry or the grocery shopping ahead of the weekend when everything is closed.
Right, so they want to say that it's not a day of vacation, it's, yeah.
Okay, so I guess my final question is, who is the target audience of this video? Who's it intended for?
So the video is to show soldiers, remind them of their rights, but it's more for commanding officers from the Army that they should learn what the rights are for their soldiers and also why those rights are necessary and why they should be sensitive to the needs, because it's not just that they need an extra provision or an extra day off. There should be some sensitivity there.
It's not a vacation day. They're just, they're working as hard as everybody else. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I understand they even have like a numbered list of like what to do and kind of how to accomplish some of these goals. But let's hope that it takes hold. Shanna, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now, there's been a lot of attention paid to the tensions along the northern border with Syria today. But for our final story tonight, let's turn to something a little bit more positive from the Israeli-Syria boundary. Earlier this month, IDF trackers and the Israeli Nature and Parks Authority came together to save a badger that had gotten itself stuck on the perimeter fence. Warrant Officer Hussein Gadir first noticed the badger who was trying to cross from the Syrian side, and he quickly notified his superiors. So within a very short amount of time, treatment was administered immediately, starting with the sedation of the badger so that she wouldn't resist rescue attempts. And the INPA park ranger Uriah Vazana says that after the badger was freed, she was released unharmed near a water source in, quote, known badger territory. Also, Vazana explains that this is a pretty common occurrence, but thanks to a very quick thinking and the ongoing Army Nature Protection Project, it's usually not a big deal. All right, now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, you can expect another drop in temperatures as the average lows fall to about 50 or 10 degrees Celsius. And residents of Jerusalem should definitely break out the space heaters as the temperatures in the capital hit 41 or 5 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow should be partly cloudy and warm during the day with highs around 75 or 24 degrees Celsius. And that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.47 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. And of course, subscribe on YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.